landlords, welcome to another episode here of CRESI's Ontario Landlord Series podcast, where we're here to educate, inform landlords here in Ontario and make sure that you're understanding each situation that you could come across. Today, we're actually going to talk to our good friend Rob Di Lisi from Stonegate Legal Services again as we break down a Schedule B that came to me through another agent at my office as one of their clients was looking to rent out a place. And we've kind of touched on this before, but today we're actually going to go through some clauses that landlords put in if they're enforceable, if they're, we're just going to talk about them one by one. Again, remember, this is not personal legal advice. This is general advice as we're talking about something, but just so that we're aware about what we can and cannot do with adding in certain clauses to a lease. And then eventually, I guess it comes down to the OSL, the Ontario Standard Lease. But there's my intro and enough talking there. Let me bring in our expert, Mr. Rob Di Lisi. How you doing today?
Good. Thanks, Kevin. I'm a little under the weather today, but hopefully you can hear me okay.
This is what I love about Chad Trooper. Even when he's not feeling his best, he's here to make sure that our landlords are getting the proper advice. Rob, thanks so much for doing it. And we'll try to make you talk less and me talk more, maybe. But let's go through these things. I'm going to just talk about what this landlord has put in here, and we can kind of break this down for everybody.
Sounds good.
A little bit as we go. He starts off with saying that I'm going to read this first few, and then we'll stop afterwards, and we'll break these ones down because they're kind of all together. Tenant agrees to provide pertinent information of tenant's application form attached here to the landlord for the purpose of credit check, if required. Landlord shall be responsible for verification of information provided on the application form. Tenant shall submit herewith a pay stub for the landlord's reference unless tenant is self-employed. Tenant and landlord agree that that any accepted offer to lease shall be transcribed by the landlord onto the Ontario Standard Lease form as required by the Residential Tenancies Act prior to completion of this agreement. And then the said rental premises shall be tenanted only by the following persons. And then I guess he would want you to write your tenants' names and then have them initial from what I'm understanding here. So we'll start with that little section there, Rob. What would you like to share just about that?
The only part that really brings up red flags is when you say only these people are allowed to live in the unit. So when you sign a lease, the people that sign the lease would be the leaseholders or the tenants, but they're allowed to bring in occupants, roommates, or guests, and they don't have to ask the landlord's permission, even if you have it in contract.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the first three are all what's happening anyways as you're applying for that lease, right? Once you sign your rental application, it says right on there that they have permission to run a credit check, and a pay stub is something that they're looking at to make sure you are going to be qualified for the tenancy. So I'm going to do a next couple here. The tenant voluntarily agrees to submit to the landlord post-dated checks for the stated rent payable to the landlord at the beginning of each yearly term to cover those months not provided for by the deposit. Tenant agrees to pay the landlord a service charge of $50 for each and every check which the tenant's bank or depository refuses to honor.
So I can make a few comments there. First of all, you can request a method of payment. You cannot require a method of payment. So if you're saying that they must give post-dated checks, that's fine if the tenant agrees, but what if they want to do e-transfer? On top of that, in regards to post-dated checks, you cannot charge more than $20 for NSF checks, not $50.
Okay. Yeah, so with our property management company, we do all of our rent through an online payment portal. And we have 3 people who choose not to pay through our portal, where we have to then deposit checks, or one gentleman does cash as well still. But anyways, no, bang on, we cannot force anybody to pay a certain way. As long as they're paying us, they can choose how they're paying us.
Yeah, there's no prejudice to the landlord.
No, to how they're going to get paid, exactly. So Here's another one that we require all of our tenants to do as well. Tenant agrees to acquire content and personal liability insurance to cover the term of the lease and any extension thereof, and shall provide the landlord or his agent with the name of the insurance company along with the policy number prior to the keys being released to the tenant for the said property.
Okay, so just a comment on that is that you cannot make it mandatory or tell the tenant that they must get contents insurance. Contents insurance is for the tenant's use or their benefit. In regards to liability, you should not be asking a tenant to get liability insurance because if you have a property in Ontario and it is mortgaged, you must have liability on that property anyways. So you can't double dip on a property. You can ask the tenant if they want to get tenants insurance. In fact, in my leases, I added in and I asked them, do you want to get tenants insurance or not? If they say no, I scratch it out so that it's there that they can later on, if they want to question me about, oh, something got damaged, well, you didn't get tenants insurance. So it's not my fault. It's your fault.
Interesting. So I've always done it as a requirement to turn over keys. I know that once they're in, I can't enforce it anymore. But we've always put it in there that we would like it before they move in, and then again, whether they cancel it or not afterwards, I knew there was nothing we could do about it for
Yeah.
that.
So you could request it. But the thing is, like, there's no prejudice to the landlord. It'd be to the tenant. If they don't want to get tenants insurance and they can't afford it and something gets damaged later on, like the high tech plumbing that's going on right now, they
Yeah.
go after the landlord.
High tech plumbing. Well, it's been removed from buildings or as many as they could, and
Still a
it's
problem.
just that one little piece. So no, for sure, because of all of it that went through, right? As they're trying to figure out. Anyways, let me move on here just with another one to make sure that we're staying on topic here because this is probably the longest one I've ever come across, and we're going to start to get into some later that are a little bit more interesting to discuss. Um, Tenant covenants and agrees that neither tenant nor tenant's guests will smoke in the rented premises. In the event this stipulation is breached, the tenant agrees to indemnify the landlord from any and all damages and losses suffered consequently therefrom. And then he's got a spot for the tenant's initials as well.
Yeah, you can't arbitrarily make that decision. That would be the board that makes that decision. So, smoking cannabis and cigarettes is legal. So, if they're in their own dwelling, they have the right to smoke marijuana or cigarettes. The only time that it could be a problem is if a landlord and a tenant are sharing a house, the landlord's upstairs, and you have an allergy to smoke. And as long as you can show that there's an allergy, yes, you can now go after the tenant for the smoking.
So would that be the same then for any mixed family, like multifamily
Yeah,
units? As long as one of the tenants has an allergy. That's
right.
basically the
Now, the problem is that if there's kids involved and marijuana smoke is going through the building, like they're going to be affected by it. But it is legal.
yeah. One of the tenants we have has 3 young kids, and she's the one smoking the marijuana that we get issued. But anyways, conversation for another day. Tenant acknowledges that they have no pets and do not have any intentions to obtain a pet during the term of this agreement and any extension thereof. In the event that the tenant acquires a pet during the term of this agreement and any extension thereof, the tenant agrees to indemnify the landlord from any and all damages and losses suffered.
No. So, under the act, under the enabling statute, pets are allowed. So you can't contract out of the law. And any damage that they do, remember the threshold for damage is high. So a lot of times it's more wear and tear. An example would be is on the bedroom doors. I see a lot of the dogs, they scratch on the bedroom door and the landlord feels that it's damage. I will tell you from my experience that because I own rental property, I sand it down, paint it, and you're good as
Excellent. Yeah, no, it definitely mostly wear and tear and coverage for the landlord as they're turning stuff over for those little things. It would be major damage where they'd be able to actually go back after something to claim any type
that's right.
of monies. So here's one. Tenant covenants and agrees that cable television, internet, telephone utilities are the responsibility of the tenant and warrants that any of the above utility accounts that are due for a period will be paid in full on or before vacating the said premises. The tenant agrees to have all utilities transferred to their name by the respective service providers prior to the completion of this agreement, unless otherwise specified in this agreement.
Okay, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, no, right. Everybody should have their name in there. Tenant agrees not to make any changes or alterations to the property without the written permission of the landlord. Normal, right?
That depends.
When we ask about paint, that's really the one we're looking at doing all the time. Is people ask about paint, and we say just need approval on color. Is how we go.
Okay,
We
but
ask them,
even
and then we
then,
can move
that's
over.
still pushing it because if they change the color of the paint, like if the landlord has to repaint it, you're not talking about millions of dollars here. It's a couple of gallons of paint. So I'm just telling you, as a landlord myself, I don't really care about the paint. I don't like when they use darker colors because it's a pain in the butt, but I don't have a problem with them painting the unit, but I usually offer to paint it if needed.
Same thing. They're allowed to do it. They're allowed to paint inside their unit, but they're not allowed to make any type of major alterations or changes to the property,
That's correct.
regardless, with permission or without. But I guess with permission, it would be something that would happen. Um, Tenant shall leave the premises, including appliances, in a clean and move-in condition and have broadloom shampooed by a professional carpet cleaning company at the end of the term of the lease or extension thereof.
It's great if the tenant agrees to it and they do it, but again, you cannot contract that they must do it. Like what's the remedy for the landlord if the tenant doesn't do it? There is
They have to do it or they have to chase them, I guess,
right.
right?
But the thing is, under the law, that's not accurate. The tenant does
Right.
not have to do that.
Tenant covenants to maintain, keep, and leave the premise in an orderly state of cleanliness and to repair any damage caused to the premises by his or her willful or negligent conduct, or that of persons who are permitted on the premises by the tenant, except to reasonable wear and tear.
So again, yeah, the threshold for damages or anything that needs to be fixed. How do we determine that it is damaged? Because what you might think is damage, I would say it's wear and tear. An example would that be is when people put up photos on the wall and there are little holes. That's not damage. That's wear and tear.
Damage, you're looking again, major issues, not just something that is a few dollars
And
to.
there's the intent, right? If I take a hammer and I start smashing the cabinets and the counter, yeah, that's damage. But if I slip and fall and I put my head through the wall and it makes a big hole, is that damage? No.
Tenant shall be responsible for the removal of snow from the property and sidewalks and the cutting and maintenance of the lawns.
Well, this one I see a lot. So under Section 20 of the Residential Tenancies Act, it says that the landlord must upkeep and repair the property. Now, what you can do is create a separate contract that you are contracting out the tenant to do the snow removal or the grass cutting. But again, that falls on the responsibility of the landlord if the tenant decides not to do it anymore. In fact, if you don't cut the grass, the city will usually add it to the property taxes of the property. So it is going to be for the landlord, not the tenant.
Yeah, no, exactly. The property owner is the one that gets the city fine and the notice up there for it to get done.
You got it.
When that grass is unruly, but it is the landlord's responsibility to maintain and upkeep the exterior of the property, including snow removal and grass. But like you said, the having that separate contract, that way it is then a different agreement to the lease is the way that you can then have the tenant enforced because it's not the same thing because you cannot have a tenant be responsible for it unless they're willingly doing it, which some do, right? They like to have their grass cut all the time and they like doing it. Same thing with snow. Um, Tenant shall not assign or sublet the premises without the landlord's written permission. Such permission shall not be arbitrarily or unreasonably withheld.
So that's not a problem. So you do need the permission of the landlord. before you assign or sublet, but I don't think you really need to put it in the contract because it's just part of the law.
Uh, Tenant is responsible for the total replacement cost of keys, entrance card, and any electronic devices or garage door opener during the lease term or any extension thereof. In the event the said items are lost, stolen, or damaged, and for any additional related costs as deemed by the landlord or concerned condominium management office, where applicable.
So this one's a tricky one because what they're saying is that if they lose a key or they lose a fob, that it should be the tenant's responsibility. Um, I don't even know how to answer this because logically speaking, it makes sense that you put it onto the tenant. But I would say, as the landlord, is you replace the value or sorry, you replace the keys, and then you can file against the tenant to recover the cost of the keys.
Okay. So here's this one is actually connected. We could have probably put them all together. Tenant agrees to pay a refundable deposit of $300 for the items stated below and covenants with the landlord upon the termination of the lease pursuant to the terms of the Residential Tenancies Act to deliver up possession of the premises to the landlord or his or her authorized agent, and further to surrender all keys and entrance devices relating to the premises, entrance doors, or other doors to the building, mailbox keys, electric garage door cards, and any other entrance device to the premises of the rental properties.
So again, you can only charge for the cost of the replacement of the key. So a friend of mine just rented out his house a few weeks ago. The cost of the key at Home Depot was $7.50. I do see for condominiums a lot of agents putting in their deals where the tenant will have to pay a 300, 500, 800, even $1,000 key deposit. That could be argued that that is an illegal deposit because it's above the cost of the replacement value.
Yeah, fobs are normally somewhere around $75, right? So if you're taking two of them, you're looking at a deposit about 150, maybe $200. Anything above that is above replacement cost for sure, and therefore, like you said, an illegal deposit, right? We can only take deposits legally for the last month's rent and any replacement costs for keys,
You got it.
right? I get seen all the time pet deposits. We want a pet damage deposit, and
I've
we'll give
seen
it
light
back
bulb
at the end.
deposits.
Pardon me?
I've seen light bulb deposits.
Light bulb. Interesting. That's a good one.
LED light bulbs.
Where rental premises are part of a condominium, tenants shall comply with all bylaws of the condominium corporation. Tenants shall be responsible for any fines or assessments levied against the landlord by the condominium corporation due to his or her his guest violations of the said bylaws. Tenant acknowledges the condominium corporation can and may eliminate any recreational facilities or part thereof at any time without notice to the tenant, and in such circumstances the tenant will not claim and or receive a rent reduction or abatement for the same.
Okay, you can contract that out. So if you're taking away amenities and the rent is including the amenities, as you start taking out those amenities, there could be a rent abatement. And but that's not for the landlord or the tenant to decide. That would be the landlord and tenant board to decide.
Same thing would go for something like if a microwave was included in your lease and now it's no longer working, they would have to replace it, even though it's
That's correct.
a nice simple thing. Or a major one would be something like air conditioning, right? Even if your tenant isn't paying rent, it is still the responsibility of the landlord to maintain and upkeep the property. And if it was rented out with air conditioning, that air conditioner must be working, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So here's another one. Either party shall notify the other party in writing of their intention to renew or not no later than 60 days prior to the termination of the lease.
No,
So yeah, we all know there how we can end the term, end the lease agreement, right? Either the tenant is telling us, or there's the ways to eviction, or the mutual release, or again the N12 where we're moving in. But we've done all those in different episodes, so we won't get into that one there.
well, can I just say just one thing is that tenants have security of tenure. It continues automatically month to month. So even it's nice that you do get notice if they're going to be staying or not. They don't have to give you notice. It's only when they decide that they're going to leave, they could possibly give you notice that they're going to be moving out.
Yeah. Anticipate they are staying until they tell you they're not.
That's correct.
Landlord shall pay real estate taxes, condominium common maintenance fees where applicable, and maintain fire insurance on the premises. Tenant acknowledges that the landlord's fire insurance on the premises provides no coverage to the tenant's property.
That's going to be contents insurance.
Yeah, yeah. It's just something that was staying above and rewritten. And anyways, landlord shall provide for the use by the tenant during the lease term the following appliances: fridge, stove, dishwasher, clothes washer, clothes dryer, and window coverings if and where applicable. So that one there is kind of off to me about it. What do you mean if and where applicable? You're saying these things are there now. Are they or aren't they? Is this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. If they're there, then they're included.
window coverings, for example, right? But it's if they're there, they're included. So anyways, I'd be fixing that up if I was doing something to say what was actually inside the property. All right. So here we got, again, just a couple of other ones here that we'll go for just to discuss. Obviously, the landlord represents and warrants that the appliances listed will be in good working order at the commencement of the lease term, but it should also stay and maintained throughout. Obviously, that is their responsibility.
That's correct.
The tenant agrees to maintain said appliances in a clean and good state of repair. The tenant agrees to pay up to $50 on each occurrence for any minor repairs required by the landlord's appliances, plumbing, electrical equipment through normal usage or accidental damage, commencing 20 days after occupancy date.
Okay. So again, I see this a lot. You cannot put a cost of maintenance and repairs under Section 20. It is the landlord's responsibility. Collecting that kind of money is illegal. Can't do that.
Okay. Here's an interesting one that I don't think should be on this agreement at all. It should definitely just be on um, a listing agreement between the landlord and the agent, but I'll read it out just so that people know. I don't know why it's there. Should the tenant at any time purchase the property, the landlord agrees to pay the agents so named in this agreement or their successor companies a fee of 4% of the purchase price, plus applicable taxes. This fee will be split equally amongst the agents so named in this agreement. The total fee will be payable to X brokerage by bank draft or certified check.
So they're putting in there what they think their commission is going to be.
I guess in the future, if these two ever buy it, but this is a rental agreement or an agreement to lease, right? Or an offer to
It's not
lease.
even relevant.
Exactly. It shouldn't be in here at all. We'll end on this one here. The landlord shall not, in any event whatsoever, be liable for or responsible for any personal injury or death that may be suffered or sustained by the tenant or any member of the tenant's family, his or her guests, or to any other person while such property on the rented premises.
Wow. Unfortunately, you can't do that. You can't contract it out of your liability. So if someone dies there and it's because of the property that something was not maintained or taken care of, you can't contract out of that liability.
So I think the key point to all of this, the takeaway today, folks out there, is what matters is what the law is, right? What is stated in the RTA or what is actual law. All of these decisions that we've talked about, a lot of them would be decided upon by the Landlord and Tenant Board if there was ever to be a complaint and a hearing then brought to. Rob, do you have anything that you want to throw out there before we conclude today?
You covered most of the clauses that we see regularly.
Yeah, so that's good. I'm glad. Again, a lot of them here are normal. Some of them are kind of off and or unnecessary. So I hope everybody got some great information today. Just understanding more about clauses to put in. If you have any questions or if there's something that you want us to discuss, please let us know. Make a comment, send us an email, reach out to us one way or the next. Please like, subscribe, and continue to share with all your landlord friends as we continue to try to bring some great information to you on a weekly basis. Rob, thanks so much again for doing this, even when you're under the weather.
Thanks for
And
having me.
the next time we talk, I'm sure you'll be back to your regular self. Talk to you soon, everybody. Bye for now.
Please remember, while we are professionals, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The advice shared may not apply to your unique situation. Always seek personalized advice from a qualified professional before making any investment decisions.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're finding it informative and useful, make sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend so that we can keep getting the information out there to Ontario landlords. And keep on joining us. We'll see you next time.